What is up, everybody? My name is Adam, otherwise known as Young NBA Analyst. Before this video starts, as I always say, make sure you follow me on my Instagram at Young NBA Analyst and follow me on my podcast. Go subscribe to my podcast at Young NBA Analyst because I also get a lot of podcasts out. And in today's episode, we're going to be analyzing each of the top 5 title contenders. I'm not going to be like ranking them in an order of a top 5, but these are like the 5 top title contenders, at least in my opinion, and I'm going to be analyzing each of those teams. So that being said, let's get straight into the video. Starting off with the Utah Jazz. The reason I'm starting off with the Utah Jazz is because they're probably the least likely out of my top 5 that I have. But we can't doubt the Jazz. Okay, the Jazz are still at the top of the West, and they're still an incredible team. The duo of Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert is still doing great, and they have great assets like Mike Conley, who's taken a large improvement from last season. Because last season it was his first year on the Jazz and he wasn't playing as well as expected. I mean, it's a brand new system. He had been playing for the Grizzlies for his entire career, and then he all of a sudden had to switch a new system. So we could expect a down year, but he's playing great and picking up right where he left off on the Grizzlies. And they also got the pretty much clear 6th Man of the Year pick in Jordan Clarkson, who's having an incredible season. And they still got their great assets like Joe Ingles, like Bojan Bogdanovic. And this team just has so much depth. They have great defense. They're one of the top defensive teams, mostly because Rudy Gobert is their defensive anchor, and as most years is a top defensive player of the year candidate. And they also got great offense because they have many guys bringing great offensive production to the table. This team is very full. It doesn't have many flaws. It's really just going to come down to, like, do they have the superstar power to win a championship? Because I'm gonna be honest, I mean, unless you count Donovan Mitchell as a superstar, which I probably wouldn't count him at that level yet, he's probably not a superstar. And that's tough because, like, in today's NBA, you're gonna need a superstar to win a championship. That's just a given. So I don't know if they're gonna be able to go over the hump, but then they do have a lot of great depth, and this team has pretty much no weaknesses. So I would personally say that they're a top title contender. I don't think they're going to win. I'm not sure if they're going to win. I'm not going to say don't think, but I'm not sure if they're going to win the championship. I feel like they just don't have enough experience, even though Donovan Mitchell is one of the best young playoff performers in the NBA, which is definitely going to help them. I just don't know if they're going to be able to beat the top superstars. They might be able to do it, but I don't know. I still have my slight doubts with this team, but I mean, you can't really doubt the team too much. They've really proved themselves this season, and they are a legit team this season. Moving on to the Brooklyn Nets. Now, the Nets it's an interesting case for the Nets because they have like a historically great offense. They have Kevin Durant, they have James Harden, they have Kyrie Irving, and then they got other great assets like Joe Harris, who's a great spot-up shooter, and they got a lot of great offense. But basketball is a two-way game. There's offense, and then there's defense. And where the Brooklyn Nets struggle is on defense. They have like a horrible defense, and they're like one of the worst defensive teams in the NBA. So it's interesting, is their offensive firepower going to be able to withstand and overcome the weaknesses that they're going to have on defense? That's a question we're all wondering. And I don't think they're going to win a title just strictly because of that reason, because if you look at a lot of the teams who have won championships in recent memory and just in general, all of them had one main thing in common: they were great on both ends of the court. That's just a common theme, and the Nets don't fit that theme. So I don't know I don't know how that's gonna damage the team. They could still make the finals. I don't have full confidence in them being able to pull off a championship without a good defense, at least a solid defense. But they don't. They have a terrible defense. So my confidence level in them winning a championship is very small. But they could still make the playoffs, and they'll probably still make the Eastern Conference Finals. But to win a championship, I don't know. But they still do have to be considered a top title contender, because despite the fact that they don't have defense, their offense is incredible. And they got 3 superstars. So you have to at least give them props. They have to at least be considered a title contender. I just don't know if they're going to win a championship because their defense may hold them back. Moving on to the Milwaukee Bucks. See, the Bucks have a great team this year, right? They got Giannis, they got Middleton, and they got Drew Holiday, their big three. And I actually think they have very underrated depth this season. They got many solid assets like Dante DiVincenzo, like Brook Lopez, Bryn Forbes. They got Thanasis. They got Bobby Portis, who's playing great this season. Pat Connaughton. They got many like solid guys. They got many great role players, and I think their depth is definitely great, and it could be a big thing for them. I think that the Bucks, it's been interesting because they haven't been playing too good recently, but I mean it's just really been a slump for them, and they got a big win against the Pelicans the other day. So I'm not too worried about that. They're not at the top of the East like they have been the last couple years, but I wouldn't worry about that too much either. They're still a great team, and it's honestly going to come down to who plays them in the playoffs, because the Heat expose them in the playoffs because they have the defensive repertoire to form the wall against Giannis, right? And Giannis still hasn't figured out how to beat the wall yet. So, and then that's really the big struggle here, because if the team can form the wall and stop Giannis, that team is screwed, because the Bucks really revolve around Giannis. Like, Giannis is very ball dominant, and he's clearly the best guy on that team, and he's very much used. He has a very high usage rate. So with that comes the question, is like, how well do the other guys do? Middleton's got to step up in the playoffs, and he usually does, but it's got to come down to like the other players stepping up if a team does happen to stop Giannis. But if they get a trip to the finals without facing any of the teams that have the guys to stop them, then they could be a tough team. I don't know if they're gonna win championship, just because I feel like Giannis still has those playoff flaws that are very detrimental to the team. He's still the most dominant player in the NBA, but when you break it down, he's just he still needs to develop a jump shot, and that's the whole reason that the teams can form the wall. So he needs to find a way to beat the wall. If he can find a way to still be dominant, even if teams form the wall, the Bucks are going to win championships. That's really the only thing holding them back. But they do also have more shot creation this season. I mean, Middleton is Middleton, right? But they also got Drew Holiday, who's been out recently, and that could be a reason why they're not playing as well. But he's also a pretty good shot creator. And Dante DiVincenzo has stepped up his shot creation this season. So they have more options on offense, and it's just another thing to look out for. I mean, Drew Holiday is a great player, and he adds a lot of value to this team that they didn't have before. So they could win a championship and surprise us, but I feel like they're still going to be held back due to Giannis's flaws, and until he fixes them, then they may not win a championship. Moving on to the Clippers. The Clippers this season have been playing great, alright? They're like the second seed in the West, and they still got Kawhi, who's playing great. They got Paul George, who's playing great. And, I mean, overall, they have a pretty deep team, as they did last season as well. They don't have Montrezl Harrell, but they do still have great assets like Lou Williams. They got Luke Kennard. They got Serge Ibaka, who's a big asset. And this team is definitely very solid, good on both ends. The question just remains, because if we're going to talk about last season in the bubble, yes, obviously they did blow a 3-1 lead, and both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George completely and utterly choked. And honestly, you can add Lou Williams there as well. So the question just becomes, are they going to be able to perform in the playoffs? Because usually Kawhi can, and that was a very unusual choke from Kawhi. But, I mean, aside from that, last year in the playoffs, he was playing fine. And Kawhi is an elite playoff performer. It's going to come down to Paul George for them. It's going to come down to Paul George, because Paul George is an elite regular season player. I think we can all agree on that. The question comes in the playoffs, is can he do what he does in the regular season in the playoffs? And judging on the last few years, the answer to that question is no. And until he is able to step up in the playoffs, that could hold them back. But this team is still playing great this season, and this team is probably really, really pissed off from last season, and they're hungry to get a championship this season. And I don't have too many doubts with this. It's really just Paul George. He's pretty much an X factor here. They're gonna need him to perform, and Kawhi's gonna be playing great. They still got great assets. So I have a lot of confidence in this team, and this team could realistically pull off a championship. I think they could win it. It's just going to come down to if Paul George can perform, and if he can, they'll probably win the championship. Now, moving on to the team that I think will win the championship is the Lakers. The Lakers this season have not been playing too well recently, although that's really just been due to Anthony Davis' injury, and it's been putting a lot of pressure on LeBron to play heavy minutes, and LeBron's been struggling as well. But I think when Anthony Davis comes back, they'll be fine, and they still got LeBron and AD, who are two of like the best players in the NBA. Anthony Davis is like a top 6 to 7, and LeBron is still like the best player in the world. And the Lakers still got great depth, they got great assets, they're great on both ends of the court. They still have like the top defensive rating in the NBA, just to show you Anthony Davis' impact, and also just the impact of everyone else, because they got great defensive assets. And even though Anthony Davis has been injured for a while, they're still top in defensive rating. That says a lot about the defense of the team, and they're still a great offensive team, and they got a lot of great playoff performers. We're going to go to last season. They did great in the playoffs. Like, they did excellent. And I think this is a team that we can have a lot of confidence in. And once Anthony Davis comes back, once they get the team rolling again, I'm confident that they'll go through the playoffs and win the championship, because this team doesn't have very many flaws either. They still got great assets like Dennis Schroeder, Montrezl Harrell, Alex Caruso, who, memes aside, is an incredible player. They also got Kyle Kuzma and just so many guys. They have so many different options. If you're going to go back to the offseason, everyone was pretty confident in this team just because of the amount of assets they were getting. Everyone just had full confidence in this team, and rightfully so. So if I had to make a pick, I'd say the Lakers, but any one of these teams could still win. It's just going to come down to, can they perform to their highest potential as a team, and are their flaws going to hold them back? But with that being said, that'll wrap up today's video, so make sure you guys subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, let me know what you think, and with that being said, always remember, clutchness forever.